receipt should have been nothing paper like any other, the kind that curls where your thumb worries it. But the logo said Riverview Inn in a font that tried to be gentle, and the total said 2 breakfasts, and the checkout time said 11. And I have been married long enough to know which details bite. It was late September in the Hudson Valley. The cider press groaned like a satisfied animal. The orchard smelled of sugar and damp leaves, and tourists posed under ladders they had no intention of climbing. My husband, Ethan, had spent 3 weeks in town handling permits. I had spent 3 weeks believing I preferred not to ask follow-ups. The survey map lay under the receipt A grid of parcels, a red X on a square of our land that touched the river like a secret door. My father had sold that wedge during a winter where propane cost more than pride. He called it temporary cash, but deeds don't hear adverbs. We had been farming around the hole ever since. I asked him over stew because stew forgives hesitations. Riverview? He met my eyes and did not blink. Old foreman's reunion, he said, and I almost laughed at the idea that foremen reunite at inns with views when their reunions have always been in parking lots with coffee. 2 breakfasts? I said. Meeting ran long. Map? Surveyor flagged the fence. We were both fluent in the language of short answers that do not invite English. He slept the sleep of the busy, and I lay awake translating the map into a face I could hate. I got up before dawn, left a note for the crew, and drove to the inn with a thermos I didn't drink. Fog hung over the river like a rumor. The desk clerk remembered nobody, because that is the skill of desk clerks worth keeping. At the cafe, a woman in a field jacket and a boy in a Mets cap sat with folders and a map like mine. I was not brave. I was propelled. Do you know Ethan Merrick? I asked. The boy looked at the woman. The woman looked at me like a doctor confirming a name before delivering news. You must be Nora, she said. I'm Alma. Your husband is helping me buy something that used to be yours. Alma spread the map, tapped the red X. This parcel used to be the ferry landing. Your grandfather leased it to the county in 1969. Your father sold the rights in 2002 for cash to cover a loan. The buyer vanished into a shell company that stopped paying taxes. The land fell into a kind of legal winter. We found a way to thaw it, but the law likes men's signatures. Ethan's carrying the bid because your father's name is complicated. Complicated. My father had put the orchard in Ethan's management after my mother died because he trusted his steadiness and because I had left for 3 years to become a person who wore black in offices. I had returned when I realized offices only pretend to be permanent. I still carried the guilt like a spare key, metal, against my heart. The boy slid a folder toward me. Inside, a letter from the county, a photocopy of the shell company's suspended status, a notarized bid bearing Ethan's name, and a second signature I recognized with a jolt, my father's. He said you wouldn't sign, Alma said. He said you would call it charity. I felt the room tilt the way rooms do when you are about to stop being gentle. I left before I could test whether I am the kind of woman who tells strangers the unedited truth about her dead father. Outside, the river slapped the pier in a rhythm that sounded like someone measuring. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. Ethan. Meet me at the north fence in an hour. I wrote back. Bring the survey map. The north fence sagged where deer believed in democracy. Ethan stood with a clipboard and 2 apples he had not washed. Alma, he said, reading my face like weather. I nodded. She told me. He held out an apple. It isn't what you think. It is always what I think, until it's not, I said, and bit into the apple because refusing good fruit is childish. He told me on the uphill side of the hill because he knows my anger behaves like gravity. Your father signed in June, he said. The county needed proof of family interest. They prefer the safety of male names when the story is messy. He grimaced at his own sentence. I should have told you. I've spent a year trying to make this happen, without you having to write a check in your mother's name. We walked the line to the river. The red X corner was overgrown with sumac and ghosts. Ethan stepped into the brush and pulled out a half-buried iron ring where the ferry rope used to clip. "Your mother used to tie ribbons here when the water was high," he said. "She called them stay, and the river ignored her. I thought, if we got this back, maybe you'd feel like we weren't losing to the water anymore." I wanted to be grateful the way wedding magazines imagine gratitude. Glowing, simple, photogenic. Instead, I felt pricked by the fact of being worked around. "You made me the person who gets told after," I said. "I made you the person who gets to say yes when it matters." He offered the apple again. I didn't take it. Apples do not care about our metaphors. They rot regardless. We reached the river where the bank shelved into glacial stone. Someone had spray-painted a heart there in 1993, and the paint had aged to something like a bruise. "There's one more thing," he said, because of course there was. "Alma didn't come alone. The other breakfast was for the auditor who can certify that the shell company's claim has expired. And for Claire." My sister's name touched the air and changed its temperature. Claire had left the valley the year the mill closed and called me only in April's. She had once told me the orchard felt like a score she could never catch up to. "She's part of the bid?" "She's the buyer if we fail. She has a grant to turn the landing into a public path. She wanted to tell you, but she thought you'd hate that idea unless it came with your name on it." I sat down on the stone and let the cold choose my posture. It did not become easy. Ethan and I fought quietly in rooms where the wallpaper had memorized happier sounds. I called Claire and said sentences we had not practiced. She drove up in a car that knew cities and hugged me the way sisters hug when they are trying to decide which childhood to remember. "I didn't want to steal your river," she said. "I wanted to unsteal it for everyone." We went to the county meeting together. The boardroom smelled like coffee that had been boiled 3 times to make it brave. Alma presented the chain of custody like a story without villains, which is the rarest kind. The auditor nodded like a metronome. The chair asked if we intended to keep the landing private. Ethan looked at me. I surprised us both. "No," I said. "We intend to keep the orchard and return the water." A murmur moved through the room like wind-stirring leaves that had been pretending to be still. We won the bid on a Thursday. On Friday, the county clerk slid a folder under the glass and said, "Congratulations," in the voice of a person who enjoys finishing things. Claire took a photo of me holding the deed like a newborn, and then we all laughed, because metaphors demand we either accept them or laugh them off before they drive the car. Fixing the landing took money and days, and a willingness to be ugly in public. We pulled tires from the mud and found a tricycle with one red handlebar. The crew built steps out of stone that had watched worse families than ours. Ethan and Claire argued about everything that doesn't matter: railings, stain color, trash cans, and agreed about the only thing that does. Handrails must be made for hands that are tired. In the orchard, the crew pressed cider and gossiped and stopped gossiping when I walked by, and then started again louder so I would know the difference between malice and habit. I wrote the new easement in language that anyone could read. This path belongs to the river and the town. The trees will go on doing what they've done since the first stupid person decided fruit should be improved by lists. I put it on the website and on the bulletin board, where we sell honey and apologies. The morning we opened, fog gripped the river like a handshake, refusing to be brief. People came in their good flannel. The mayor cut a ribbon, because mayors need ribbon. Claire stood with her hands in her pockets and cried like a person whose body had been holding water for years. Ethan stood on the stone shelf where the heart bruise lived and said nothing. He put his palm on the iron ring and kept it there until the heat of his hand had nowhere else to go. After, we walked the path as if we were customers. 2 boys threw sticks and called them boats, and then asked me if the boats would ride home. "Only if you give them a pencil," I said, and one boy fished a golf pencil from his pocket like a magic trick. We left it stuck in the iron ring. It made the landing look ready for a list. Intrigue does not end when the paper changes hands. It takes a new job monitoring the place where it used to live. The Riverview receipt remained under a magnet on our fridge for a month like a dare. On a Tuesday, I threw it away. On a Wednesday, I pulled it back out because paper should not get to tell me when a story's over. On a Thursday, I used it as a bookmark in a book about bridges and felt the petty joy of turning one use into another. The last light of the orchard year fell sideways through branches and made the rows look like scripture without the part where you're obliged to agree. Ethan and I sat on the tailgate with mugs that would never match and let our shoulders speak first. "I'm sorry. I believed secrecy could be kindness," he said. "I am sorry. I believe suspicion could be wisdom," I said. Between us, the thermos ticked the way cooling engines do when they know they've done enough. If there is a twist, it is this. The survey map had one more red X we had missed under a coffee ring. Alma found it on a copy a month later. It marked the old spring box up the hill water that had been capped in 1954 and forgotten, the kind the old men talk about like a saint. We hiked up with shovels and found the stones, pulled them like bad teeth, and the water came shyly, then gladly, then like an inheritance that forgives the paperwork. We looked at each other, at the box, at the orchard, and laughed the way tired people laugh when a day gives them more than they deserve. In winter, the path silvered with frost, and the orchard slept the way exhausted people do, sincerely. We salted the steps and checked the handrail and argued about whether to take down the sign for the season. We left it. "The river doesn't close," Claire said. "Why should the words?" I didn't have a better answer and have been trying not to since. On the night before the first pressing of the new year, I spread the survey map on the table and traced the lines with my finger until they felt less like fences and more like sentences that know where they want to end. Ethan came in with flour on his shirt from helping Mrs. Keene bake pies. He washed his hands at the sink, turned off the water with his wrist, and said the truest short thing we've learned. "Next time, I tell you first." "Next time I know," I said. "I listen on purpose." If you need a moral, go sit by the iron ring and wait for a boat-shaped stick to come back. It might. It might not. Either way, you will have spent an hour looking at a place where your family practiced being honest. The river will be there, unimpressed and infinite, and the orchard will be behind you, finite and stubborn. Between them is a path where people walk their dogs and their grudges until both are tired in a good way. That is enough light for me. We found the old ferry timetable in a shoebox in the attic yellow paper, fares penciled in, a note from my grandfather. "Don't run late. The river dislikes waiting." I taped it in the farm stand next to the jar where people leave dollars and take apples and pretend commerce is a trust fall. Alma sent a photo of the deed recording with a caption. "Filed." The word looked more beautiful than it had a right to. Claire texted me a picture of a pair of muddy boots on her doorstep and wrote, "Belong to you?" I wrote back, "Sometimes." We are practicing sharing nouns. At the first frost market, a stranger bought a half-gallon and said, "This tastes like somebody told the truth." I gave her 20% off and pretended it was a sale and not a ritual. On New Year's Day, we walked the path in the kind of cold that makes your teeth ring if you talk. We didn't talk. We stopped by the iron ring and touched it like a waypoint. Somebody had hung 3 ribbons there, blue, green, white, each with a name in marker. I didn't know the names. I didn't have to. I tied a short one for my mother. It said only, "Stayed." We held a pruning workshop under a sky the color of sheet metal. Old men argued about angles as if marriages depended on them, which, in a way, they do. Claire learned how to make the first cut clean and the second kinder. Ethan showed a boy how to feel for the ridge where bark wants to tear and how to hold it steady with a thumb. Small knowledge, large mercy. The town paper ran a piece titled, "Path to the Past Reopens," and a columnist I had never met wrote, "Return is not the same as retreat." I clipped it and taped it to the cider press, where the wet would decide if it was worthy. It held. A teenager painted over the old heart bruise with a better one, and we left it, because sentiment is a currency you cannot counterfeit if you let the town mint it. The mayor frowned and then smiled and pretended it had been a plan. I found one of my mother's index cards in a cookbook. Syrup for stubborn throats, water, honey, lemon, patience. I made it for Claire when she lost her voice shouting over the loader. Ethan said it worked because of the lemon. I said it worked because of the patience. We were both right and also missed the point, which was that we were in the kitchen together. Alma's boy, the one in the man's cap, asked if he could help with the spring box. He brought a thermos and 3 bad puns about water and stayed until the trench looked like a sentence we could live with. I like projects that end with drinking, he said, and Ethan handed him a cup like a benediction. We staged a small play at the farm stand, a table with 3 jars marked river, trees, and you. People dropped in coins like it was a voting booth for priorities. At the end of the day, you had the most, because people are only noble until they are asked to count. We split the money evenly anyway and put a note on the jar. Nice try. The first school group came on a Thursday, with shoes that were not prepared for truth. We showed them graphs and scion wood and the place where a branch had broken under fruit, because abundance is not the same as strength. A girl asked if the river ever got jealous of the trees. They're cousins, I said. They don't compete, they flood. The teacher blinked like I had said a thing worth writing down. We found a crate of old labels from the 1970s, apples with eyelashes, fonts that promised flavor by implication. Claire suggested we print new labels with the iron ring on them. Call it ring cider, she said, and the town said yes with their wallets. On a night of early frost, someone stole the donation box at the path. Claire put up a sign that said, if you needed it, keep it. If you didn't, bring it back with a story. 2 days later, the box returned with $3, a bus token, and a note. Sorry, bad weather inside. Ethan taught me to read the river the way I had taught him to read the trees. Look for the seam that runs faster, he said. It tells you where the bottom changes. Marriage, it turns out, is mostly about noticing where the bottom changes before you capsize from pride. The crew set a bench halfway up the hill where the spring path meets the orchard road. The plaque says, for pausing. People obeyed it with relief. We did too. In late winter, when daylight comes home hungry, we pressed a small batch of cider and labeled it, Stay. It sold out because people love to drink commands that sound like comfort. If you come in summer, you'll see the iron ring decorated with ribbons and pencil stubs. If you come in rain, you'll see the water answer questions nobody asked out loud. If you come in a fight, you will leave with your hands full of something that has agreed to be enough. On the 2nd anniversary of getting the landing back, we walked down with mugs and a pie and sat on the stone where the heart had been painted, now faded to a rumor. The river kept its counsel. We kept ours better. When we went home, we left the pie tin under the iron ring with a fork and a note. Take a bite. Tell the truth. Pass it on. At a town hall, a fisherman complained that the new path took 3 parking spots he used to nap in between tides. Claire offered him coffee. Ethan offered him a reserve sign with his boat's name. He refused both and then, a week later, brought a cooler of bluefish and took the sign anyway. Compromise wears an odd hat, but it keeps rain off. We hosted night orchard with lanterns along the rows. People walk slowly because light asks you to. A couple argued softly near the macoons and then, after the 5th lantern, stopped. Later they bought 2 pies, which is either reconciliation or insulation. We honored both. A small flood came in March and tested the new steps. The handrail held. The plaque for pausing stayed. We shoveled silt and found the lost bus token turned river bright. I taped it to the farm ledger with a strip of blue painter's tape and wrote, Tax paid by weather. In pruning season, I kept a list of things we cut and things we kept. Cut, the limb that drags, the apology that asks for a prize, the receipt that lies by omission. Keep, the branch that aims, the story that names its sharp parts, the map that shows the water even when it's inconvenient. When the first peaches blushed, we sat under the springbox oak and ate two without wiping our hands. Juice mapped our wrists. "I thought the river would take something when we gave it back the path," Ethan said. "It did," I answered. "It took the part of us that thought hoarding was safety.